All right. Good morning and afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. We are going to jump in and get started here. There we go. Julia, can you confirm that my screen is sharing?
It's there.
All right, beautiful. Okay, good deal. All right, well, thanks for joining us today for our weekly Ask the Expert with Julia. Today we're going to be discussing, or Julia rather, is going to be discussing an introduction to items and how all that works, since Studio Designer is an item-based system. And if you have any questions, please, by all means, start submitting those. Julia, just to let those of you who are unfamiliar with Julia. She works for her company is New Age Financial Consulting. She provides bookkeeping and accounting support, specializing in unique and complex accounting needs for all types of interior design firms and showrooms. And she also offers comprehensive procurement services for designers and showrooms as well. And as I was saying, if you have questions, there's your Zoom toolbar. There's a little QA button. Go ahead and click that button, and that window will pop up in order for you to type in your questions. So as Julie is going through all of the content today, feel free to drop those questions in, and then we'll get to as many of those questions as we possibly can. And with that being said, Julia, I will hand it over to you. And there you go.
Hi.
How's it?
Yeah, how's it going? It's going. Good morning, good afternoon. Anthony, same. Just make sure can you confirm that you could see my studio screen?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So thank you everyone for joining. As Anthony has mentioned, today we're going to be talking about items, really basic items, and what I like to call the item life cycle, and going through all the steps associated from point A to point Z. At the bottom, or really wherever your Zoom toolbar is, mine happens to be at the bottom, there's a question and answer box. Please submit any questions that you have, whether they're related to items or in sort of kind of related to items. We'll try to get through as many questions as we can. And also, if the question is relevant to what especially if I'm in the middle of a screen or showing something, please feel free to ask in that moment as well, because sometimes it's a lot easier to explain while we're doing something than trying to then, go back into it. So so great first question. So training for the design doc merge into studio. Elizabeth, that may be best to potentially connect offline. You're more than welcome to email me or email support. And we could go through that, but some of the, some of the training, and we've converted clients from design docs to studio. It is, I would say is consistent across the board, right? So today we're going to be talking about item entry. And so what does that mean? Who does that pertain to? So from the designer standpoint, they should be living in the projects and then items screen. So we're in our test database. I'm working on Mr. Tom Hanks, who lives at 19th Street, which seems like it would be located in New York City, but for some reason it's in Colorado, I think, or something like that. So the designer's living in 19th Street, in our item screen in 19th Street, because that's the project we're purchasing for at this time. And so remember, studio, one of the biggest differentials of a studio versus, for example, a QuickBooks is that it's an item-based system, right? So everything starts with your item. An item entry can be very basic. It obviously can get more and more complex. For those of you who do not use Studio Capture is a widget. For me, it's located up here, but you can make sure that you're downloading it from your home screen. So go into your home screen and scroll. Oh, Anthony, did they move it? It's not, where is it?
Which is it? What do you think?
The Studio Capture. Oh, it's right here. Sorry, it was always at the bottom. It's right here. Sorry. Make sure that you downloaded Studio Capture. We'll use a Studio Capture example to get an item into the home screen. And if you're in Chrome, obviously download it for Chrome, and Safari, download it for Safari, and then pin it to your bar up here. So let's go back into our item screen. So here we are, we're on 19th Street, and we're going to begin proposing a very large living room proposal to the client, and everything starts with the item. So remember, in Studio, you only need to enter the item one time, right? The item follows you to the proposal stage, it follows you to the order stage, and it follows you to the invoice stage. So I source from First Dibs all day, every day. My ship to is very important. And I know that this is a common question of, well, what if I don't need to send an actual purchase order to the to the vendor, excuse me. I mean, that's a really great question, right? Because not all vendors need actual purchase orders. But remember, Studio needs a purchase order to capture cost of goods. So you will be clicking a purchase order for every single item that you are buying and or selling to the client. From there, this field here can be utilized on, I would say, many different reports. You could utilize it if you have items going to a receiver. And so if you have some products going to a receiver and some products going maybe directly to a home or to your office, you can build out a customized expediting report that can be sent to your receiving warehouse by utilizing the ship to. So the ship to really should be accurate. It should reflect where the product was sent, regardless of whether or not your purchase order is sent to the vendor. Just remember that. Also, your ship tos need to be consistent. They need to be the same if you want multiple items to the same vendor on the same purchase order. And we could go through an example of what that looks like. But if I bought 2 items from First Dibs and I had different ship tos, or my ship to was blank, Studio is automatically marking those as 2 separate. They're going to create 2 separate purchase orders because a purchase order cannot reflect more than one ship to. So I'm going to buy, and this is, Anthony and talk about this all the time. I really struggle where I want to buy something pretty and I want to buy something that I like in my fake land. Oh, I'm going to buy a light. So I'm going to buy a light. Hold on. Now it's not an accessory. It's a light. And well, this isn't, there's a better word for it than hanging light. We're just going to call it light. Light need description. Oh my golly. Whoops. So I'm buying this light. My side mark automatically copies. I prefer that under my company preferences. So if you go into settings and you go into my company and under codes to the right, here's my side mark. And so what do I want my side mark to reflect? I want it to copy my my description and my item. And so when I set it here, it will automatically copy this line item to this line item. And remember, this side mark populates on the purchase order, which we will look at momentarily. So this light is going into the bar, sure. My next item in this room is item number 917, and it's component A, and I'm going to say pretty black hanging light. My descriptions need help, I realize. And so this is going to cost $995. My markup is preset for this particular client. We could expand upon that further. I find that this question is asked a lot in terms of what's a typical, how do firms typically charge for markup? And the answer to that is, well, it varies across the board, but honestly, the easiest way, that doesn't mean it's necessarily the most profitable, but the easiest way, especially in Studio, is to set your markup percentage based upon client. And you would do that under projects, all addresses. We're going to go to clients and we're going to go to 19th Street, and they're set up as a project. And under codes in here, I have my selling markup set up at 35%. But so much of this also is dictated by your client contract. And so what does your client contract say? Does your contract say you can't exceed retail? Well, then if it says that, you can't have a flat markup, because what happens in a Pottery Barn example where you're getting 20% off of retail, but then you're marking it up 35%. So the client really is paying over retail cost. So just be very, very mindful, but typically this, in terms of tracking, in terms of usage, I find that a markup for clients is easiest, but make sure your contract states that. If your contract states not to exceed retail, or for example, if you have really great relationships with a four hands, or you have stock and dealer pricing anywhere, you may be better off structuring a contract that says that your vendor discounts vary, and that, for example, you share a discount with clients and that costs won't exceed retail. And if you say share and not split, that doesn't necessarily tie you to the fact that you need to make sure that the vendor discount is split 50-50. It could be 60-40 or 70-30, depending on the client. But in this particular example, Mr. Tom Hanks is set up with a flat 35% markup on any item that I purchase. Just as an additional thought, another, again, really great way to make sure you're capturing additional revenue and additional potentially revenue streams is if you're someone who consistently sells custom furniture and true custom upholstery, really, because custom millwork and then custom case goods can be a little bit more expensive with less, the product is so expensive. And so therefore there's less, I think, sometimes room for markup. But custom upholstery, for example, especially if you're working with a custom upholsterer, your contract should dictate that the markup on true custom items are most likely different than markup across any other vendor, because in that situation, you are actually the vendor, right? There, you're working with a number of vendors to come up with a piece. And so your name is on that bespoke piece of furniture, and therefore markup on those particular items can be higher. I would say we're seeing a typical custom upholstery markup of approximately 50-55%, really depends. Can you change the markup per item? Correct, even if you default it? Yes. So something to keep in mind, and this is a really great point. Thank you, Jody. When all of your company settings, so we're in the client, but let's actually go into company settings too. Company settings are the hierarchy. Maybe that would be a good way of saying it. So company settings default then to client settings. So under, for example, let's go to markup because we're on that topic. So our markup under our entire company is set to default at 20%. So what that means is anytime I enter a new client, so I'm in a new client, right? Brand new address ID. But my markup defaulted to 20% here because that's what my company settings show. And at this point, I could say, okay, well, this particular contract didn't go out at 20%. It went out at 33.33. That sounds terrible, but you never know. So 33.33 goes in here. From here, the item gets entered into I enter a new item into this fake new project. And then yes, I can at this point in time override my individual fields on the item. Our goal of both of these settings, meaning the company settings and the vendor settings and the client settings, is to make the item entry faster. So I'm trying to enter as much accurate information into both of these, right? So company codes and then vendor address codes, really, both, again, vendor client, to make this process easier. But yes, absolutely, you could override all of these. You could change the whole thing. Are you able to do a markup and also include a discount? My gut answer to that is no, but I would probably need to play around with it, and then I would sort of ask to understand why, right? Because you'd be utilizing this same box typically. So if we're showing someone a retail price and then we're discounting it, right? We're doing it through this screen here. So that's a little bit in terms of markup. So again, I'm selling my fake light here. My markup is 35%. It calculated my markup in terms of dollar value. My sales tax is turned on. All of this, again, is set up with sales codes, which we could review as well, and my deposits. And so again, deposits come from, typically, I would say they come from here, my client codes. And so what do you want to collect in terms of proposals? So remember, the item goes on a proposal first. An invoice is later on down the road. So in terms of your proposal, are you someone that's in the habit of collecting 50% to 100% are standards, but there's 75% we see pretty often as well. So do you want to collect 100% across the board on all of your items? And so in this particular example, we're collecting 100%. So our sales code, we have our price in here. And then what are we doing about freight? Well, freight is a great question, always rate changing and never straightforward. And how do we bill for freight? I think, again, an open-ended, no industry standards, can be handled a number of different ways. You could do something in terms of flat freight. If you're billing actual freight, I do recommend marking it up. So we're going to mark it up 35%. Our deposit percentage is 100, and we are charging sales tax because the item is taxable and the freight is taxable because it's coming from the same vendor. So here we entered one item. And so actually, let's then also duplicate that item. We're going to clone it. So here's first dibs. Where's my light? Light. Perfect. I'm going to clone, and I'm going to make it item number 918. It did that automatically, component A. And I'm actually going to take out the ship to, because I just forgot. I forgot to enter the ship to, or I'm not sure where it's going. And I would like to have this item flow through to the purchase order so you could see what it looks like. And so we do need to change this up, right? So this is a different light. Now we have to go find a light. Sure, this one. Okay. So now we're ordering a table lamp. Table lamp, whoops. Table lamp. Pretty black. I don't know, wooden brown. And this one, oh, that copied it over because here I'm using my description for my vendor and my client. If you then wanted to change and do something different with your vendor description, uncheck this box and then continue. So a lot of times we'll have SKU numbers in here. And then we'll have special instructions to the vendor. Please, I don't know. Please don't break, sure. And then to the client, we're going to say, oh, freight forthcoming, because on this particular item, we don't have the freight and I wanted to communicate it to the client. So save and close. So, oh, great. So light, first dibs, 19th Street. So now we have these two items. And so here we are, here's item 917A. They're both in the same room, 918A. If you notice, my ship to here is TBD. My ship to here is 19th Street. We could talk about components, and actually let's do that after we finish these two particular items and how that impacts something like the proposal, which is client facing. Some firms use components, some do not. Again, all a matter of preference. And also I would say, just be consistent in terms of how you're utilizing components. And so now we have these two items, we're ready to go. We know the spec is good and we're going to send it to the client on a proposal. So we're selecting the two items up here, select. You could also change, if you're adding a lot of items to a proposal, I really like changing my view and making it item list. I would also at that point in time, let's actually take these out for a second, take out light. Change my per page view. I would also, when I change my view, I then throw everything, for example, that's on an invoice to the bottom. And I would say, well, we'll throw all that stuff to the bottom. I don't need any of it. I want to be able to click all of these items and throw them on a proposal. So this, again, for me is the easiest way. I'm going to select and deselect, unselect. So I'm back in first dibs. I'm going to go back to my light. So here are my two items. I'm going to click them over here and I'm going to create a proposal. Here they are, very pretty. They're on a proposal. PDF. I personally prefer proposal image left, but that's just me. Your image quantity, image quality also here depends on your pixels. So I know some firms like large images, some do not. You could set the preference of that too in your company preferences under my company and codes and actually report defaults. So how do you want that image size to appear when you send documents? So here under this setting. So again, I like mine small. Remember, all of these different options, are options under your company codes. So under reports, whoops, scroll down, and this is dictating all of that, right? So this section here, reports and client and portal options. How do you want the proposal to initially look to a client, or how do you typically want it to look to a client, right? So what's the standard in terms of the company? Proposals really should look uniform, right? Everyone should look the same. And then from here, if you wanted to do any type of customizations, you could obviously do so. So remember, if you're not utilizing Pay Now, we are, definitely explore that option in terms of Studio Pay. So again, go to settings, go to my company and payment defaults. Sign up for Studio Pay if you haven't already done so, and that way this Pay Now link can be embedded directly into your proposal. A common question is, can I send a proposal through email with the Pay Now link, or does it need to be through the client portal? And the answer to that is it absolutely can just be through email. You don't need the client portal enabled to be able to use the Pay Now links. And so I think, again, lots of firms do it different ways. Some have clients who really want an interactive portal and some want nothing to do with that. So make sure it's working for your client. If your client is looking for something like an interactive portal to approve items, then the portal is absolutely fantastic. But if a client would still prefer to receive everything in email, again, this Pay Now link is here for you as well. Remember, in the Pay Now link, so if you go to payment defaults under company settings, you can decide if you want clients up here to pay in full. And so this is, again, a really great default. And then on the company level, I believe, but let's actually double check. You should be able to decide under their payments if you want the required full payment. And so again, remember, the company default flows down to the client. And then on the client side, if you, for example, that's typically your process, you want 100% payment, which I'm an advocate for. I think it saves on the administrative side. But if you wanted to turn that off, you would just go into that particular client when you're sending a particular proposal, turn this off, and then be able to collect 50% deposit. Remember, the deposit request here also is dictated by these deposit percentages. Also, remember, just as a quick sort of side note and potentially just a quick trick, is you don't have to use the deposit. If you really did need to do something a little bit odd and make it a flat dollar value, you could. This makes absolutely no logical sense, obviously, but it is doable. I think as another quick trick, you could also, if you're somebody who typically collects 50% or 75% on proposals, if you go into your item screen, when you're in the actual proposal, so not in the item screen, but proposal first, then the item tab, the percentage complete button is a great way to update all items to 100%. Or if you're in construction and you're doing 33, 33, 33, another really great way. So then click on update the selling deposit percentage on all items. I don't know if I showed the totals before, but so now everything's back to 100%. And so I did that, right? Especially if you have a lot of items, that can get really, really tedious. So actually, let's go back to let's talk about components. So at the moment, we have two items and their components, right? So there's 917A and 918B. This is not necessarily an ideal example of how you would utilize components, but components in Studio are utilized or can be utilized as a way to roll up the cost of, let's say, product. So you have a sofa, and the sofa has the fabric, the actual upholsterer, the sofa trim, and then the nail heads. So 4 separate components. If you number those 917A and then you number them 917B, and you go back to your proposal, and you go back to PDF, you could see that our company preferences dictate that we show all components. We are not rolling up components. We're showing everything, whether it says A or D or E, right? So this says 917A, 917B, and here are our totals. If you show first component only, meaning you are showing only components A, components after the letter A, so anything from B and beyond, they actually are hidden. So we're only displaying components A, but the prices of component B and or above component B are rolled into the cost of the first line item here. So this is a really great idea for samples, for example. What do you do with samples? Do you bill them back to clients or do you not bill them back to clients? So if you have samples as components B, C, D, and E, you are then able to roll up all of the sample costs into the final fabric of the selection when you're billing a client. That's obviously just an example. Sometimes, right, there are firms who, in their custom furniture examples, they're not showing the clients all of the different components, but they want to show them one price, $25,000 for a sofa. But on the back end, right, there's still 5 or 4 or 3 or 6 different vendors and different purchase orders associated with that specific sofa. So it depends on how you want the client presentation, right, the client experience to look like. We're going to turn this back actually to 917A because these two are obviously not at all really related, and we're not trying to hide the cost of the lamp. The other thing to keep in mind about components is that the components to work need to be in the same room and they need to be on the same proposal. So if those two things are in alignment, you will not be able to roll them up. There's nothing for them to roll up into. So I'm going to hit save and close. Great question. So when would you clone an item? Is it used when making a different component in the same item or for new items? I would actually say you could use it a number of different ways. So we just had I had a call earlier and the question was, I need to order a really large hardware sample that has 50 unique items. What's the best way to do that? Well, the by the book answer is, right, you need to enter each item individually. You could bulk enter, but really it's, I would say, defeating the purpose a bit of Studio. And so if you do individually enter, and let's say you're buying all of them from Waterworks and you're using sort of one stock image, it's a lot easier, right, to keep cloning and just changing. So then your vendor at Waterworks stays the same, your sales code stays the same, the ship to stays the same. Your item number changes when you clone, and you're just changing your descriptions around. And hopefully it's only slightly because you're placing one large hardware order. And if your picture is sort of generic enough, right, you're changing the descriptions up here and the purchase costs. So you're just changing less fields. So in theory, right, it should be allowing you to enter items a little bit more efficiently. I would say the other time that cloning is used the most is when you're actually specifying the same thing, but across projects. So 19th Street has this really great light. It's right here. And it actually is going to look really great in another client of ours. And so we're going to find it in 19th Street and just hit clone. And so when we hit clone, the client here is opened back up and I could assign it to any one of my clients. Let's see, hopefully it didn't, oh, it did clone. So let me delete it. I would say those are, again, the most used cases in terms of cloning a new item. So another question, actually, how come you can't approve or decline individual items on the proposal? You should be able to do that actually in the client portal. And Anthony, I think, can confirm for me, but I'm pretty positive that a client is able to go into a portal and decline items on a specific proposal.
Correct. Yeah, there's
But that has to be done in the client portal. So yes, the proposals are not interactive, but the client portal is interactive. So back to my point about Studio Pay, right there, you're able to send a proposal, a non-interactive proposal with a Studio Pay link. But if you're looking for anything interactive, then a client does need to set up the client portal.
I'm double checking if you can actually do, I haven't looked at the interactive proposal option that's in Studio that you can send out. I think that might actually be able to. I'll double check, but yeah, definitely the client portal would be the way to go. Otherwise, if you get authorization from the client, you can select the status on the item itself as approved in Studio, but that's it.
Similar question while we're talking about entering items. Do you have to add freight into the item selling price if you don't want it to print out separately on the proposal? So yeah, yes. So other costs, right? So let's go to this proposal in terms of what it looks like. So let's go to PDF. So notice on this proposal, other costs. So here's my price. Oh, so actually look at first component this way. Sorry, and I'll answer that question next. So when we change it to proposal image left, right, the unit cost is here. And so if you notice, as soon as I toggle first component on, it combines both of those. Oh, did I not change my price in my fake land? Maybe I didn't. It rolls up this unit cost into this unit cost. And so in terms of freight and other costs, so freight is tricky, I'm sure, right? We all know that freight does live in the other cost section of Studio. Other costs do live at the bottom of a proposal, or if you wanted to turn them on individually, then they live in underneath the pricing display of items on a proposal. So you can choose to see them individually or at the bottom. If you didn't want to show freight, yes, I mean, you would have to mark up the unit cost. But just remember, if you are doing that, it is skewing your revenue and cost of goods sold when you're pulling any type of, well, any type of income report and potentially even profit reports if you're looking at profit by sales code. And depending on if that's something that's important to you, keep that, I would say keep that in mind.
Just a quick follow-up to the approval. The interactive document only allows the client to approve the whole proposal, not individual items. That is only done in the client portal.
Oh, thank you. So let's, I think we talked a good amount about our proposal. We sent this very pretty proposal to the client. They approved it, yay. And so actually 19th Street has $1 million in funds available because they're super easy to work with. So we're gonna go into money in just as we're going through the item life cycle. So we sent it, they approved it, and they're going to pay for, it. So just to follow up on that client portal question, again, if that's something that's important to you, you would have to set up the individual clients on the client portal. Otherwise, you're not, there's no way for a client to approve the items individually. So we're in money in, this particular client, we emailed them this proposal. They said, go ahead to order, please use funds available. So we go into money in, we filter by 19th Street. And here we are in funds available. They have $874,000. And we're going to pay for it in full, right? We asked for payment in full. So we are going to hit amount to apply. The totals here. My payment method is apply payment to items from funds available. I recommend that you notate your check ID in some sort of unique way. I'm now showing those items are paid in full. So let's go back to my item screen. And actually, let's just filter by this proposal, 100,582. So we're in 19th Street, 100. Or maybe it was 528. Did I mix up my numbers? 528. So the next step, right? So they paid for these two items. The next step is to order them. So as soon as client funds come in, right, we should always be in the habit of not fronting money for vendors, right? So we wait for the client funds first. This is a great time to be able to begin utilizing your priority colors here. So if this is something you haven't looked at or thought about previously, go to settings and scroll. I'm in here all the time. You think I would know? Priorities. So you can now name priorities. I say that I don't know how many times a day, but you didn't used to be able to. So for me to this day, I find this fact beyond exciting. And so go into item priorities and think about how you can potentially utilize these colors to help you manage a project. And this could probably be a whole hour in itself in terms of project management, but these are really great resources and great tools, right? And they're very visual to allow you to have it be an indicator to yourself, the client paid, I need to order, or, oh, I have an actual purchase order, but that doesn't mean I didn't email the vendor yet. I haven't ordered the product yet, etc. So think about that as you're ordering. And so again, I'm in my item screen. My proposal is paid for, right? Paid. You could also see that here, view payments. And so here's my indication to myself. Oh, this came out of funds available. Great, thank you. And back in my item screen, and I'm going to throw both of these on a purchase order. So remember, this is the same client, the same vendor, and I want them to be on the same order, but my ship to is different, right? My ship to here was filled out. My ship to here is TBD. So I'm going to create order. And if you notice, right, only one item is on this order. If I go back into my item screen, I have two different orders. And that is because, and this is a common question, well, why did that happen? And it's because of our ship to. So if you go back to your order, right, my ship to is here. So I could only have one ship to. And so if this First Dibs doesn't need an actual order from us, but if Kravitz Custom Furniture did, and I had one item shipping to one place and one item shipping to another place, my purchase order would not be able to indicate that in any way. Unless it was in the vendor description, but that's not how a purchase order should be used. So Studio is set up to default that for you. So it's telling you, something's wrong, right? We weren't able to place the items on the same order. So you could fix that. You could go in to this item and you could void this order. It's going to say to you, oh, it's supposed to say to you, do you want to void? But okay, we voided. And if you go back into here, you can change your ship to be 19th Street. And then you should be able to add it to what I think is 200,493, but let's just double check. Yep. And so now the system will allow me to add it to 200,493. It is telling me that I'm modifying some accounting entries. You do have to be mindful with this. Like this shouldn't be something you do a year after the fact, or 3 months after the fact, or a month after the fact. But this is definitely something you could do, I would say, within a couple day period. I would be particular about it spanning months, but that, that's sort of diving into more details. But again, you are able to add, once you change your ship to, it'll allow you to place it on the same order. And so now when we pull up this order, we have two items and the ship to is the same and the ship to is right here. And so from here, I place the items on an order. First Dibs is online, but let's pretend that ready to go. I don't know what my things are. PO approved. Oh, how about this says PO approve. And so potentially this could be at an office where I need to send this order. After I generate the order, it needs to be approved. And let's say it needs to be approved by the design director or the principal or my senior. And so then I have this order here. I'm able to email it directly out of Studio, or I'm able to PDF it and send it to the design director through my email, just so they can ensure that my specifications are correct. For those of you not emailing out of Studio, I would say, right, you have to do obviously what works best for the office. But what one of my favorite things is if you set up your vendor IDs well, and you have a select few vendors where you have to communicate the purchase order. This is a really great way and really easy way to get all of the contacts in one easy place. And same with RFQs. So we have a lot of offices who, and actually we could go back to the item screen, but when you generate an RFQ, emailing it out of Studio, again, as long as your contacts are set up, typically is just a little bit faster. So here, let's pretend I needed to email this to First Dibs. My design director approved it. I sent them an email separately. Blah, 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 blah here. Okay. So we generated the order. The PO is approved. I don't know if I have colors to not ready. Back order. Well, let's pretend these are back ordered. And so actually, if you do utilize colors, remember you can update colors and codes in bulk, which is fantastic. So select your 2 items, go to your 3 dots, and go to bulk update and change my priority color. I'm going to say to brown because I don't know, why not? They are back ordered from First Dibs, but not long enough because we actually really want to pay for them. Well, actually, you know what? Let's pay for them 50%. So let's make sure our purchase order 2 is set up to be 50% deposit. And so this deposit percentage in this column is dictated by your vendor balances. And I said vendor balances, but I meant vendor ID. So go to all addresses and go to vendor and First Dibs. And here's our codes. And so here, right, what am I typically paying? And so this is obviously, again, a question a lot. Well, what happens when I have to pay 50 and 100%? I get that, but what are you doing most of, right? So like a Pottery Barn, for the most part, we are typically sending 100%. Are there some 50% because of long lead times? Sure, of course. But someone asked earlier, can you change these on the item level? You can't, right? We're just trying to get the information in here as quickly and efficiently as possible. So I'm going to change my deposit percentage to 50%. And then on this item as well, because I want the deposit percentage to be indicative of what the vendor actually is charging me on my credit card. So save and close. I go to the order and I go to payment. So even though it's on back order, they did charge me my 50%. And here's my American Express. 50%, 50%, and I'm posting my vendor payment. And so now we go back in our item screen and we're filtered specifically by this proposal. So we have these 2 items. And so where are we in our item life cycle and what was the flow of the item? So the item went into studio first. The item went on a proposal second. The proposal was sent to the client. The client paid for the proposal. So we see that here. And so if you notice, I have a negative 134. That means my deposit percentages on the selling side are somewhere not correct. Though I don't see where. Oh, maybe sales tax? No, 100, 100, 100. 1724, what the negative 134 do? Where's it coming from? See if that just changed it. No. Other costs? Oh, 50% on my selling, on my freight. Those negatives, they don't, I always say like they don't have an accounting impact, but they drive me crazy in this particular screen. That's just me personally. So I like to I like to make sure that the negatives here are correct, meaning at a quick glance, I'm able to look to understand the decline, overpay, short pay, etc. And so same with this item. It's because I cloned the item. So that's what happens when you clone. So my 100%. So the item went on a proposal, the client paid, I'm able to see that here. I then place the items on an order. My order was approved. That's my own internal process. And my payment, I generated the payment on the order itself. So from here, and this is usually its own sort of topic in terms of expediting, right? Your code section is where you would be managing the expediting, right, of this order, meaning the placement and getting the product from the vendor all the way, whether it be to the client home. And so expediting reports in Studio are amazing. You would need to customize them to make sure they fit your office workflow and they fit the codes you want to use. Also remember in your 3 dots, you could bulk update your dates, which again is really helpful. So that way, again, if you have an item, if you have multiple items on an order, you could bulk update here and you could select the items you'd like. In those scenarios, sometimes too, changing your view here is helpful. And then you could also bulk update on the order itself and go to items and then go down here and update all dates in this order. But remember, so if you have 7 items and some of them shipped and some of them didn't, if you did it this way, all of the codes would update. But if you did it based upon individual item selection here, only the items you selected would update. So 2 different ways to do it. from here, let's assume that this item is shipping, it's no longer back ordered, even though my status color does say back ordered, and I'm ready to invoice. I like to invoice personally, whether it be upon installation, upon transfer of ownership of the actual product. I also really want to make sure I'm not prematurely invoicing, and therefore I'm losing out on price changes, right? Because what's going to happen, we can actually do this. So in this scenario, this item was back ordered. And so First Dibs sent us an email and they said, your freight went up. It went up on both of these items. I'm so sorry, but it did. And so now I want to go into other costs and I want to update this to $2.99. I'm going to change my selling freight as well to $2.99. Save and close. And I'm going to do the same on this one. $2.99 and $2.99. What are we doing in terms of collecting this dollar value? Well, you could do a number of things, right? You could throw these on an invoice if you're certain that there will be no additional charges. You can resend the proposal. The proposal at the bottom of a screen will show the total. This proposal is relatively straightforward because there's only 2 line items. It'll give you this deposit balance. Another great thing, and I think sometimes a clarifying thing to do for a client is to send the client total balance report. We're going to filter it by 19th Street. And actually, I'm only going to filter it by this proposal, because I want the client to see that they actually paid for the item. And so the proposal, the actual proposal, doesn't break it down by item, it breaks it down by proposal, as we know. So when you have multiple items and price changes and both up and down, right, meaning credits and debits with the client, generating the client total balance report, which is not wanting to move over. Generating the client total balance report allows the client to see then how much money was applied to each individual item. And then this balance here, this $34.49, or that payment, ties into the $34.49 here. So a lot of times we'll send it together. We'll send the actual proposal and then the client total balance report, so the client could very quickly see, oh, they applied payments in this particular way, and here's my new total. Something else to think about, and you again have to decide how you handle this in an office, but if you wanted notes to be client facing, anytime you have a price change, you could add it into your notes section, but remember, this has to be across the board, right? So you would either make notes internal or notes client facing. You could now actually add notes to a proposal. That's I would say like a newer-ish feature. So here, so show notes. Though I don't see them. But I actually usually show notes, and maybe it could be my proposal view. But I usually show notes on this particular report, because this is how I like to explain the price changes. So even though the proposal is prettier, right, with an image, you could also add an image to this particular report. So we could do that. We could say add image. And then I want to also add notes. And so then I'm able to very quickly communicate with the client. I'm not necessarily, I'm not moving all the fields around. I'm not making it extra pretty. I would always put the image usually first. I don't like the image to be last. JN. And so we're back in 19th Street. And my proposal is 528. Oh, what is happening? It's not liking notes in there either, but that. Maybe there's 2 note fields now. Client notes, let's see. Typically I pull notes, client notes, vendor notes. Oh, sorry, item description notes, because it's coming from the, whoops. Let's try that again. So I put that note right into my item note. So sorry about that. I pulled the wrong field in. And so now, oh, and I wonder now actually the proposal should work. I wonder too. So proposal is 100,528. And so here are my notes, right? So again, they have to be client facing across the board, but this is a really great, I would say relatively easy way to communicate with the client when you've had freight changes. And again, up or down, right? If quantities went down or if you reselected an item and for example, you zeroed out the entire purchase cost because there was a really long lead time and you wanted to reflect an overpayment on an item. Again, this is a really great communication tool. So let's actually go back into our items so that way we can finish up our item life cycle just because we're getting to the end of the call. So in this particular example, our back order was released. If we received all these emails and all of my receipts. And so go under images and attachments. And so remember, all of your vendor documentation, it usually is best if you could store it on the item itself. It makes it very, very easy for everyone across the board to be able to follow what happened on the item. So go into upload, and then I have obviously here it's random documentation, but I have all of these. I have my, I don't know, email. I have my acknowledgement. I have my receipt. I have my CC form, and I have my shipping confirmation. So I upload as many vendor documentations as I can to the item itself. And from here, if you'd like to hyperlink them to the purchase order, this is certainly something you can do, especially if you're utilizing the purchase order. If you're not utilizing the purchase order as a communication tool with the vendor, hyperlinking obviously isn't going to get you very far. So I hyperlinked all of my documents to this order. Here's my order. I'm going to show attachments. And if I am sending this first dibs order to first dibs, they're then able to see all of my backup documentation right here. This is also a really great communication tool, again, for the office and for anyone working with you on the accounting side, because if there's a discrepancy in terms of the purchase order, hopefully the vendor documentation catches all of that. So again, something to add into the workflow. So let's though close the loop. So we got all of our documentation. We only uploaded it to one of the items. We didn't do a good job uploading it to here. And that is because I didn't do what I just said you should do by going into the order, going into items. There's a shortcut here to attach a document to all of the items. And that's right here. Choose a file to attach to all. I'm going to add the same things, but whatever I did. And so now all of the documents I just added are on both of these items. So here's the ones, right? Because they're not named. And then in the other one, there should be a lot more, some named and some not named. Oh, it didn't reattach them because they were already there, but here's an additional one that I didn't attach the first time, and now it's just named document. So first dibs acknowledged my order. It's no longer on back order. I'm actually going to finish paying for it. American Express, I paid for it again today. I don't know, it wasn't back ordered very long. Post vendor payments. The question about how to add images. So you can add images to any item report. So if you're in your 2010 report and under all, and you go to edit reports, under specified data, you always have an image option, which is right here. And you can add it to the report and move around how you'd like it displayed. So I'm back in my item screen again. Remember, this is my home base. So remember my deposit percentages again. I didn't do a good job, did I? 100. 100. This one I fixed. Let's fix this one. 100. This is paid for in full, and here are my price differences. So in this particular example, remember, they have a lot of money in funds available. So I did send this particular client not only the proposal, but I also sent them this handy report or some other handy report with my notes that I must have closed out of for the client to be able to pay the price differences. They approved them and they said, please take it out of funds available. So I go into projects. Nope. Yep. Nope. I go into accounting. I go into money in. I go into 19th Street. Here's my 100,528. Here are my balances. I'm taking money out of their funds available. It's paid for in full. I go back to my item screen. My item screen is now showing zeros across the board, and I actually need to change my status. Oh, I have to, do I have it installed? Not ready. Approved. Attention. Ready to go. Review. Typically there's an installed status. Which one makes the most sense? I don't know. Does this say request inspection? Let's just pick that one. And then let's go ahead and rename it because that's silly. It's funny. I wonder what request inspection actually meant. Install. I love to use, and I would recommend if you're not necessarily using all 8 of the colors, that I understand, but there's a couple colors that I think are really, really helpful for teams or even as an individual, again, to help you manage where the item is in not only like the item life cycle, but also the expediting flow. So installed is a really great one and it's relatively easy. So as soon as you know that the items, so now they actually say installed instead of inspection. So the items are now installed. Our balances were collected. I collected balances on a client total balance report, but you could have also invoiced for the balances. And just remember the final step is definitely to invoice the item because Studio is accrual based and you do need to recognize the revenue and the cost of sales. And so we are invoicing at this point in time. You may choose to send this invoice to a client for their purposes. You certainly do not have to because the balances are paid. But you do, regardless, even if you're not sending it to a client, you do still need to generate the invoice so that we could close the loop on everything related to the Studio accounting process as well. So hopefully that was helpful to everyone. I think we could actually have a couple offshoots, Anthony, in terms of, we didn't cover Studio Capture, right? So there's probably a couple offshoots we could add into the Wednesday mix from here.
Absolutely, because I don't know how many individuals know, but we had there's been some significant updates to Studio Capture with the automatic importing of metadata, obviously the release for design tools, and the inspiration library is coming this month, so inspirations can be captured by Studio Capture as well. So there's a lot of updates that I think everybody's going to really enjoy. So, but with that being said, again, as always, Julia, thank you so much for doing this for us.
You're welcome.
Folks, if you guys need to get in contact with Julia, here's her information, Julia at newagefinancialconsulting.com. There's also her phone number and her website there as well. You need to reach out to support at studiodesigner.com is a great starting point. Additionally, you can click on the chat bubble on the dashboard in Studio and speak with our AI chatbot initially that is now supported by ChatGPT. So that's a pretty cool upgraded function. Still being able to get routed to a live agent as well. But the chatbot has actually cut by 50% almost the amount of tickets that we've received. So it's helping out immensely getting to designers' questions right off the bat without needing to wait for an email response or wait for an agent. Super helpful. So utilize those tools to get a hold of us if you need to. Other than that, we look forward to seeing, I think, some of you tomorrow, or I'm sorry, next week, following weeks for these weekly webinars. So please join us and come on down. Other than that, have a great and wonderful day, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Really great questions today too. So thank you.